Look, up in the sky!
It's a bird!
It's a plane!
It's the Bangers and Mash Show! Yes, those champions for justice, Banger Man and his ally, Mash Boy, disguised as mild-mannered podcasters, Zach and JD. They fight crime. Okay, kids, I don't know if you noticed, but we're doing something a little different today here on the Bangers and Mash Show. You know, this isn't just a horror podcast.
We talk about all kinds of nerdy goods, like superheroes, for instance.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about superhero movies. Now, really, JD, I think it's fair to say that we occupy ourselves most of the time by yammering on about horror movies. We probably occupy ourselves the rest of the time by yammering on about superheroes and superhero movies. You think that's fair to say?
I would agree so, yes.
Yeah, like who should be the next villain in the next movie? Who should play this character? These are things we talk about all the time. On my computer, I have a list of superhero movies that have been released in what I call the modern era. And this list is actually in the hundreds, because there have been a lot of movies that have come out. We're not going to talk about all of those, because that's a lot of movies to talk about. Today we're going to talk about a select grouping from this list. We're going to talk about the Superman franchise, the X-Men franchise, the Spider-Man franchise, and a couple other of the more recent Marvel films, and a few odds and ends here and there.
Holy omission, Batman!
Oh no, I've forgotten a major franchise here, haven't I, JD?
Yes, you forgot Batman, which is the best superhero ever.
Well, there's a reason for that. Now, you gotta realize, the Batman film franchise spans 8 movies over 3 different continuities. There are 10 different animated cartoons, numerous comics and video games. Basically, Batman is a huge multimedia franchise in and of itself. And I really think that's enough material there for its own episode. Plus, I don't know if you know this, but happens to be a new Batman movie coming out this summer.
OMG, what is it called?
It's called The Dark Knight Rises. So I'm thinking, like, when that comes out, that might be an opportune time to maybe do a Batman episode, you think? Maybe? You think people will be searching?
You know, that might be a good idea.
Yeah, it might be, yeah. I have them occasionally. I feel like if we're going to talk about superhero movies, we need to start with really the film that birthed the modern superhero movie.
Which would be Superman the movie.
Superman from 1978. What are your thoughts on this one, JD?
Gene Hackman is Lex Luthor. He blows California off the map with a bomb.
He attempts to.
Or attempts to. I was getting to that next part, thank you. And then Superman gets so pissed off because Lex Luthor kills the love of his life, Lois Lane, and he flies backwards around the world in super speed and makes the world spin backwards, which alters the timeline.
Yeah, because physics works that way, you know.
So, Superman, in my opinion, it's an awesome movie.
Superman is so strong he can punch physics. The first Superman movie really is, it's a classic.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, you know, a lot of people complain about the early 80s Superman films, saying they're too campy, that they're too silly. They don't like that version of Superman where Superman is perfect and Clark Kent is a goofy clown. Basically, there's no threat because Superman's unstoppable. He can move planets.
This is back in the time when Superman had to do power for every comic.
Yeah, every occasion. Anytime he needed to get out of a jam, he had super ventriloquism or whatever. The thing that really makes the movie work for me is its cast, which is wonderful for the most part.
Yeah.
Christopher Reeves was really the iconic Superman in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and still to this day, like, nobody really fits the bill like him.
Yeah, it's hard to find some because he has those good, wholesome looks, but at the same time, he looks believable that he could be Superman. And that's another thing people don't understand about Superman. Superman doesn't have to be huge and muscular. He's Superman. He has powers. Why does he have biceps the size of Thanksgiving turkeys?
Which is how the cartoon's drawn, people.
Yeah. I personally like Margot Kidder a lot as Lois Lane.
Yeah, I like her so much better than Kate Bosworth.
We'll get to Superman Returns. We have a couple choice words for that movie. A lot of people say the scene of Superman flying around Metropolis, stopping a human fly on the side of the building, and getting the little girl's kitten out of the tree. This stuff is campy and silly and ridiculous, but to me, that really kind of represents what Superman is. He doesn't just go out there and fight supervillains. He's not always fighting Doomsday. He's out there doing normal superhero stuff. He's a servant of the public.
I agree.
And of course, this is an origin story. And this movie really affected a lot of the things we think about Superman, because first off, the whole concept of Krypton looking like a big crystal cave is from this movie. Originally, Krypton was kind of a Flash Gordon sort of retro-futuristic design. The whole thing about the S on his chest being the Jor-El family symbol was from this movie. That wasn't in the comics. And that was actually Marlon Brando's idea. Marlon Brando, who was Jor-El.
Really?
Yeah, his dad. There are potentially people out there who haven't seen this movie, though I don't want to know you.
Yeah, me neither. You are dead to me if you have not seen this movie.
The thing with the Superman origin story is it's so well known. When the new movie comes out, I'm worried about this because hardcore comic book nerds know there's a comic out there called All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, who sums up the Superman origin story in 4 panels and 8 words at the beginning of the comic. Doomed planet, desperate scientists, last hope, kindly couple, and that's it. And that's all you need to know because Superman's origin is pretty well known at this point. So I like the way they set up the character as a mythic figure. It's about an hour into this movie before Superman even shows up as Superman.
Well, it is a bit of a longer movie, isn't it?
Christopher Reeves doesn't even show up until about the halfway point.
Yeah, it's about a half hour in before Christopher Reeves shows up.
I feel like you could probably blame all these superhero movies that come out. The first movie always has to be an origin story, no matter how many times we know. Like the new Spider-Man movie is an origin story, even though everybody knows Spider-Man's origin.
But Zach, we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that. But this movie sort of starts that, and I guess you can blame it for that slightly. I was talking about how this film sets up this character as sort of a mythic figure. The film even opens up with like a little kid reading a comic book and saying, you know, in the 1930s there was a great city called Metropolis, and the hero of that city was Superman. Which leads into that opening credits with the names flying at you and that wonderful John Williams theme that is so iconic. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, that sounds like other themes.
It sounds a lot like the Star Wars themes, but that's just John Williams. A legitimate bone I will pick with this movie is Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, because in the comics, even in the 70s, Lex Luthor was a mad scientist. And the movies kind of turn him into a petty criminal who's just out to make a lot of money. His whole plot in this movie is a landowner scam that involves nuclear missiles. Really, he always has these comic relief sidekicks. What's the name of his cousin, played by Ned Beatty? Otis. There's the hot chick in this movie that screws him over.
Tessmacher. Mrs. Tessmacher.
Lex probably could have fired those people. If my girlfriend kind of ruined my entire plan for world domination or whatever, I probably wouldn't want to keep her around. Just throwing that out there. His planning is flawed, is the point I'm making. Best version of Lex Luthor is a sort of superior scientist character whose whole shtick is that he believes Superman limits humanity's potential. Because with Superman around, humanity's never going to test itself, so Lex Luthor has to challenge him, and he's doing it for you, Lex Luthor says.
He views Superman as a modern god. Mm-hmm. And that's why he despises him, because he believes that he should be the god and Superman should not.
Yeah, he should be the one that's leading the world. The opinion that Superman is holding him back. Because it doesn't matter how many weights you lift, Lex, you're never going to be as strong as Superman. And I feel like that character maybe gets a bit of a short shaft in this movie. Though Gene Hackman's fun. It's not a bad performance. He's entertaining.
Yeah, I don't think it was so much Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor so much as it was the way that the script was written.
The comic relief sidekicks. Those are the parts of the movie that really stick out and are kind of hard to take in the modern.
My biggest gripe with any of the movies that have Lex Luthor in them is that he is always wearing a wig.
Lex Luthor is the most iconic bald man in comics. Maybe it's him and Professor Xavier. They're close.
Professor X is probably more.
But I just feel like, yeah, I agree with you. Lex Luthor should be bald. What the hell, movies? Don't get me wrong, parts of this film are pretty cheesy. Like the scene, "Can you read my mind?" That stuff, it works for me because Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder had legitimate chemistry together.
Yeah.
Even though that stuff is schmaltzy and cheesy and arguably doesn't belong in this movie, I feel it works. And really, that's the heart of the film. The romance between Superman and Lois Lane. That really makes the movie work. It makes it endure more than it would have if it was just a special effects film.
You know what else is really campy?
What?
The fact that he spins around in a circle and drills a hole through the street.
Yeah, well, I don't know. He does that shit in the comics.
Ironically, right where Lex Luthor's lair is.
Yeah, Lex Luthor's underground lair. But the special effects in this movie, I feel, hold up pretty well.
Yeah, they really do hold up pretty good.
They really went to the effort to make them look good. Making a guy fly in today's era, which we'll talk about later, a recent film that came out that does this on a very low budget, it's pretty easy, making it look like somebody can fly. But back in the 70s, late 70s, this was kind of a new thing. The teaser trailer, which is one of my favorites, it was footage from a camera mounted on the nose of an airplane. And it was just that shot of it soaring through the clouds and titles that say, "You will believe a man can fly," and then Superman, the movie. It works. It's a simple effect, but it's totally effective. And you buy it every minute. I think Superman the movie from 1978 is a great film. I really think it works. Even with him going around the world backwards, Lex Luthor having...
I actually really... That's one of my favorite parts of the movie, is the fact that he can turn back time.
I love that primal scream he does when he pulls Lois's dead body out of the car.
And then he goes,
He points his fist up towards the sky and screams out, totally face fucks physics.
Even his primal scream is believable. The way that he leads up to that.
He's in pain.
You know, you can actually believe that somebody just thoroughly pissed off this motherfucker.
And that's an important thing about Superman, in this film anyway. That's what humanizes the character. A lot of people who are, let's face it, Marvel fans, bitch that the DC heroes are too powerful and you can't relate to them, that they're too godlike, which is bogus bullshit to anybody who's actually read a good Superman comic.
Well, being more of a Marvel fan than I am, I will have to disagree with that, because as much as I love the character, I gotta bring her down on this one. I mean, the Phoenix?
Yeah, really.
How is anybody supposed to relate to that? She can devour a whole galaxy.
Well, not even Phoenix. Wolverine in the comics has come back from a single cell in 5 minutes. These characters are all ridiculously overpowered. Even though some people will make the argument that they're more rooted in reality because they're in New York City, they're not in Metropolis. Some people say that you can't relate to Superman, but the thing is, it's not hard to humanize Superman. The fact that he feels love for Lois Lane and they have a legitimate relationship, that's an easy way to do it.
An illegitimate child.
Well, in some versions, yeah. That's an easy way to do it right there, and that's really kind of the main theme in this movie anyway, which we'll talk about more in a second. Again, I'll bring up All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison. There's a wonderful sequence in that comic where Superman is off fighting, I think it's a sub-dimensional monster that's eating matter, because that's Grant Morrison. He's crazy. That's when his father dies, when Pa Kent has a heart attack. And there's this really gut-wrenchingly sad scene of Superman flying back to his father saying, "Why can't I save you? I can't save everybody." So it's not hard to humanize Superman, and I think this film does it fantastically. It does it because of Christopher Reeve's performance, because of his chemistry with Kidder. I just feel this is a really good film, and it's really the foundation for the modern superhero movie in so many ways. Before, the superhero movies were campy, like the 60s Batman show, and this is really the first one to do it kind of serious, even though this movie is still pretty campy.
Well, yeah, the movie's really campy, but it still has a lot of serious elements to it, too.
Superman the movie and Superman 2 were shot back-to-back with Richard Donner as the director. The producers of the film, the Salkinds, were having difficulty with Donner. They thought he was too difficult. They wanted the films to be kind of campy and jokey, and he was trying to make them serious. They shot about half of Superman 2 before firing Richard Donner and bringing in a British director by the name of Richard Lester, who was well known for his movies with the Beatles. So Superman 2 feels like a film split in two in a lot of ways, because you have some very serious action and moments, but then you have stuff like a guy getting an ice cream cone blown into his face, or Superman pulling the S off his chest and throwing it as a net or something.
Or Planet Houston.
Yes, Houston. There is an important reason why Superman 2 is so awesome.
And that's because he hit something besides Lex Luthor.
General Zod, though very over-the-top and silly, is a wonderful character, especially when played by Terrence Stamp. This film brings the action. If the first movie is more about introducing Superman to the world and what he can do, this movie is about challenging him by introducing a villain that's as powerful as him. In fact, 3 villains that are as powerful as him. Now, this is, of course, set up in the first movie by these 3 criminals being sent to the Phantom Zone in that weird spinning mirror thing, them screaming in space. Ah! It's Zod, General Zod, and Ursa, who is like his second in command, and also there's some romantic thing going on there too, right?
I would say so, yeah.
And then Non, which is the big, silent, strong dude. The premise of this film is that in the very beginning, Superman stops a nuclear missile from being fired in France, and it goes out into space, and it hits the floating weird mirror thing the criminals are in, and they get set loose, and they destroy a satellite on the moon, and they pants an astronaut. Basically, they go about fucking shit up. They take over planet Houston, and Zod makes them kneel before him. And all along, Superman is being kind of bitchy and whiny because he can't fuck Lois Lane. He's sad about it.
So he goes and gets his powers revoked.
In this weird sort of glass, kind of like the teleporter from the original Fly.
And then he fucks Lois, and then grows a pair of cojones. Gets his powers back.
And proceeds to whoop some ass. But there's that wonderful scene where the 3 Kryptonian criminals are in Metropolis, and it's really just a battle royale between the 3 of them and Superman.
And it's awesome. There's buses flying at people.
There's buses flying at people, and people getting knocked through walls.
And cell phone well, what looks like a cell phone tower, because of course cell phones didn't exist.
I think it was just a regular telephone tower.
It could have been a radio tower, or it could have been a futuristic cell phone tower, Zach. Quit being such an ass purger.
There's a lot of good action in this film, even though the special effects in this movie don't hold up as well as they did in the last one, perhaps. I think you could probably say that.
I still like the second one better.
The second one has a lot more action in it. I feel like it's not as good as a movie as the first one, but it's probably more entertaining.
And psst, this is the last good Superman movie.
It kind of is. One of the things that stick out for me is that final scene after he gets his powers back and he goes into the diner and now he's Superman and he beats up that random dude that was giving him trouble when he was depowered. That's kind of petty. I always feel like how he defeats Zod and the other two at the end of the movie is a little bit of a cheat. How they force him to step... They don't know that he's depowered and they force him to step into the chamber to make him depowered. And unbeknownst to us, Superman reversed the polarity on the thing or something. And it depowers everybody else in the room outside of his chamber. And then he proceeds to wipe the floor with the three criminals. And do they die?
There's a question mark.
Well, I read in one of the TV versions of this movie, you see the military outside of the Fortress of Solitude, and they find Zod and Ursa and Non, and they take them into custody. But you don't see that in the theatrical cut. You just see them go down through the ice. So presumably they freeze to death. Superman totally fucking killed those people.
But TV is a bunch of softies, and they have to make a happy ending for everybody.
Well, Superman tries not to kill people in the comic. You know, Zod had it coming. Number two, like I said, I feel it's a weaker film. It's definitely campier, but it's got some badass action, and I enjoy it. Now, the next Superman movie from 1983, the creatively titled Superman 3. It's been a while since I've seen this one, JD.
It's been a while for myself, but Richard Pryor's in it, so...
The movie begins with some bicycles being knocked over, and it starts off a domino effect, eventually ends up getting a building knocked over, and this movie is really full-blown comedy, to the detriment of the film, I feel.
There was some kind of nuclear reactor problem in Smallville.
That's the one thing this film really does. It takes us back to Smallville, introduces Lana Lang as an important character. But mostly what I remember of this movie is Richard Pryor is joking around. And Lex Luthor's in this, right? But I mostly remember the main bad guy being some British dude, and he's making a supercomputer, and his girlfriend gets sucked into the computer, and Superman fights the computer at the end, and it's trying to crush him with its walls and stuff.
It's basically a cheap way of doing Brainiac.
Kind of. And that's another frustrating thing about these Superman movies. They've never used any villains besides Luthor and Zod. Even the new one, Zod is the villain. And it's sort of frustrating for us hardcore comic nerds.
We should see some Metallo or some Brainiac.
I really wanted to see Metallo in the new movie. I thought he would be a very good choice for a new film. Sort of a new villain to start us off on. Because he's not as important. It doesn't require much
Or even
backstory.
Doomsday. I mean, you would think that Doomsday...
Well, you know, when they tried to make Death and Rebirth of Superman in the 90s, that's a movie that never got made that we're going to talk about in this podcast, because there's some wonderful anecdotes involved there. But Superman 3, somehow, it's like red kryptonite, I think, that splits Superman and Clark Kent into two different bodies. The separated Superman is a dick, and Clark Kent is a pussy. So the film is kind of fighting against itself in the sense that you have the Richard Pryor storyline where it's very silly and campy and basically a full-blown comedy. He gets rich by stealing 1 cent off of every bank transaction, and it adds up and he has like $1 million at the end of the day, which is a plot line they stole wholesale for the movie Office Space. And then you have this whole thing of Superman being split in two. I know Lana Lang and Lois Lane are in this movie, but I don't remember what they did.
No. Honestly, I don't remember much about the movie other than Richard Pryor was in it. I didn't even know about the red kryptonite, which, by the way, was wrong. Because the red kryptonite would not split Superman into two beings. It just makes him a huge asshole. He's angry all the time, and he'll, like, kill people and shit.
Yeah, he'll burn Jimmy Olsen's World Greatest Dad sweater. He turns into a super dick. Most nerds seem to agree that this movie sucks, except for the scene where Clark Kent finally gets up the balls to fight jerk-ass Superman in the junkyard.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool. The special effects in the first movie are pretty much flawless, hold up extremely well. Special effects in the second movie, a little sillier, but still plausible. Special effects in this third movie, you're really beginning to lose us. And that trend continues in the next film. The special effects are just god-awful.
Glue on fingernails and...
We're going to talk about Quest for Peace. At the end of the junkyard fight, Clark Kent somehow pulls Superman into himself, sort of without explanation, and fuses the two of them back together again, so he can go in and save the world from this...
That was a plot device.
Mad. Yeah, I don't remember much about the movie. I think I've only seen it once or twice. I just remember mostly thinking it wasn't...
You own it.
Yeah, I do own it. I own lots of movies I've only seen once or twice. Even at the time, Superman 3 was not well received. It was not the end of the franchise, but a lot of people were going, we're a little tired of this. For a long time, they were trying to get another one made. And eventually, the Superman rights ended up with a studio called Cannon, which were very famous in the 80s for their low-budget action movies, like Missing in Action, and a bunch of other low-budget stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, I love 80s Cannon movies. They are great, fantastic cheese. But that doesn't mean I want them to have the rights to Superman. And in 1987, so this is a couple of years after the last one, they cooked up a movie called Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Christopher Reeves didn't want to do this movie. Christopher Reeve only agreed to do Superman 4 if Cannon would finance a film, a passion project of his, called Street Smart, which is very famous for introducing the world to Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman played a pimp called Fast Black in this movie and got his first Oscar nomination.
I think I remember this movie now.
Yeah. So he really didn't want to do Superman 4, though he was involved in writing it. And something Christopher Reeves was very passionate at the time was nuclear disarmament, which was a big issue in the 80s. And he was involved heavily in the writing process. And he said, if I'm going to make Superman 4, it's going to be my version of Superman, where Superman is an agent for nuclear disarmament.
Yay!
Which is what we want to see him doing. Yeah, we want to see him making speeches at the UN.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. That's the appeal of the character.
He supposedly saves every person in the world on a daily basis, so he has time to go and make conferences at the UN. So.
Yes. Now, this movie, it begins, I believe, with Lex Luthor getting burst out of jail, and he's like on a chain gang, which totally existed in 1987. And John Cryer, better known for his role in films like Pretty in Pink and the TV show 2.5 Men, plays another cousin of Lex Luthor, and he breaks him out of prison with a car. They like somehow tricks the cops into getting into this like flashy pimp mobile, and it drives off a cliff or something, or explodes. Somehow Lex Luthor, always with his vendetta against Superman. First off, how the hell did they get Gene Hackman and Margot Kidder back for this one? They must have needed the money, man.
I guess so.
I don't even remember the details much, but somehow Lex Luthor creates Nuclear Man from Superman's DNA and some nuclear mojo. I don't know. It's ridiculous. And Nuclear Man has sort of a mullet and kind of a gold lame outfit and has super sharp nails, and he cuts Superman with his super sharp Lee press-ons, and this infects him with radiation, and he can't fly. And
he looks kind of like Sentry with silver glue on nails.
Yeah, kind of predates Sentry.
And if you're not a comic book nerd, you don't know who that is.
You don't know who Sentry is, no. The special effects in this film are really infamously bad. In the first movie, it was so believable when Superman and Lois Lane were flying through the sky together. In this movie, it looks like Superman is trying to murder Lois Lane by dropping her off of a building. And there's some scene where Lex Luthor invents a machine, cars are standing on end and spinning around in the streets. This film is like a fever dream. And there's the Three Companies scene where Superman is dating Lana Lang and Lois Lane at the same time, and he's dating Lana Lang as Clark Kent and Lois Lane as Superman, so he's jumping into one end of a car as Clark Kent and jumping out of the other end of the car as Superman. It is just bad, hacky slapstick. There's no place in this series. If it wasn't apparent already, the movie doesn't make any sense, because Nuclear Man, though is named Nuclear Man, he's actually solar powered, and Superman defeats him at first by putting him in an elevator and throwing him onto the moon. Later on, the light from the sun gets in under cracks underneath the elevator, and that revives Nuclear Man. How come the light didn't travel into the elevator while it was floating towards the moon?
Maybe it was sunset?
In their battle together across the world, Superman and Nuclear Man, while they're fighting, destroy the Great Wall of China. And instead of putting it back together brick by brick, using his super speed like Superman would normally do, Superman just looks. He looks at the Great Wall of China, and I think badly animated squiggly lines come out of his eyes, and puts it together with his super sight, apparently, which is something he can do, I guess.
That's playing to the whole he has a different power in every comic book.
And of course, the movie ends. I don't even remember how he defeats Nuclear Man, but it happens somehow, and Lex Luthor goes back into jail. It seems like he would save. This is the problem I have with Batman as well, but Superman 2. Seems like he would save a lot of lives if he just suspended his thou shall not kill thing. Just for the one occasion, Batman had killed the Joker back in the 40s. Think of hundreds of lives he would have saved. The film ends with Superman putting all of the world's nuclear weapons into a giant net and throwing them into the sun, which seems like a bad idea to me.
Yeah, I don't think that would be too wise.
Hey, Mercury, you're fucked. Good thing nobody lives on that planet. Of course, this film was apparently cut pretty severely, and originally there was a version 1 of Nuclear Man that was kind of like Bizarro Light. He was sort of a more direct clone of Superman, and there are pictures online of him. Like if you put Gary Glitter and Snow Miser from A Year Without a Santa Claus into the Brundlefly telepod together, this version of Bizarro would come out on the other end. See? I'm right, aren't I?
Yes, you are.
So this film destroyed the franchise.
That was it.
And apparently Cannon was actually working on a Superman 5 when Christopher Reeves had his very tragic equestrian accident, made the film impossible to do. But apparently the script was so terrible, even he said he wanted nothing to do with it before the accident. Brainiac was actually supposed to be in that movie. Pose as the mayor. He was supposed to pose as the mayor of Metropolis and try and take over the city using, the ultimate evil, politics. The rights to the Superman film franchise diverted to Warner Brothers when they bought DC Comics. For a long time, they were attempting to get a new Superman movie made. and there were a lot of screenplays. And at one point, Tim Burton was attached to direct with Nicolas Cage starring. And it would have been the death and rebirth storyline. Superman would have been killed by Doomsday, and his soul would have gone into the baby that was inside of Lois Lane. And she would have given birth to him, and he would have grown to giant size in time to save the world from Brainiac, who was the primary villain in the film. Some versions of the screenplay even had Brainiac and Lex Luthor fusing into a single being called Lexiac, which they would later do on the Justice League cartoon. There's a very famous video, in fact, anybody listening to this probably knows about it, of Kevin Smith was attached to write the film. He did a treatment. A very famous video where he talks about meeting the producer of the film, John Peters, same guy who produced the Batman films, and he had a really wacky version of what Superman was. Superman couldn't fly, couldn't wear a blue suit, had to fight a giant spider in the last act. Apparently, Warner Brothers spent millions of dollars on scripts and pre-production art and costume design. You can actually find the picture of Nicolas Cage in the Superman suit online. It's terrible looking.
It was the long-haired Superman, by the way.
Yeah, it was the mulleted Superman that we had in the 90s. The part of me wishes this film had been made, because it would have been the cutthroat island of superhero movies. It just would have been a complete fiasco. It would have done to Superman what Batman and Robin did to Batman. It would have been that level of madness. A part of me admires that kind of insanity.
I admire that kind of insanity when it comes to Batman, because it's Batman.
There were a lot of Superman projects thrown around after this one collapsed. There was going to be a Batman vs. Superman movie that was going to be directed by either McGee or Wolfgang Peterson. J.J. Abrams, who's very famous for Lost at the time and is now famous for rebooting Star Trek, wrote a script called Superman Flyby that had Superman doing Matrix Kung Fu in the sky, and Lex Luthor was a Kryptonian, and Krypton never blew up, and Superman dies in the first act, and Jor-El kills himself and goes to heaven and tells Superman to get his ass back down to Earth, which works somehow. And this film would have cost $1 gazillion and just would have been totally destroyed the continuity, completely fucked with it. The Superman movie that did end up getting made, which was Superman Returns in 2006. With Batman, Warner Brothers had managed to resurrect that franchise by giving it to an auteur director, Christopher Nolan. And I think they had the same attitude, well, that worked with Batman. Let's give Superman to an auteur filmmaker, a filmmaker like Bryan Singer, who had had a lot of success with the first two X-Men movies. Let's see what he can do with Superman. It's pretty clear in this movie that Bryan Singer has a huge, massive, pulsating boner for the Richard Donner films. Because this movie is a direct continuation of those movies. It ignores 3 and 4, but it's supposed to pick up directly after the end of Superman 2, even though all the actors are different, and it's 20 years later. But it's the same sort of aesthetic. Metropolis looks the same, Krypton looks the same, Lex Luthor acts the same, and the film picks up from Superman 2 because Lois Lane has a child now, has a little boy, who she claims to be the product of her relationship with this douchebag whose name isn't important, played by the same dude who played Cyclops.
Yeah, Bryan Singer must have had a huge heart-on for James Masters.
Yeah, he does. First off, Superman doesn't really do anything exciting. Big showpiece in this film is he lifts a really big rock. That's your climax of the movie.
And then dies.
Yeah, well, he doesn't die, he almost dies, and the people's belief in him bring him back to life, JD.
Oh, that's right.
It's America's love for Superman that brings him back to life.
If you have seen this movie you love it, then you are on crack.
I remember actually, when I first saw this film in the theaters, I remember liking it. And on second viewing, it's kind of like, what the fuck was I thinking?
I have an appreciation for it because it's a Superman movie.
They do some things that are successful. The scene where he saves the space shuttle airplane thing from crashing is cool.
Yeah, I really like that. And I really like when he gets shot in the eye. I know you don't, but I like it when he gets shot in the eye. A part of me has always wondered, well, what happens if Superman gets something in his eye? Because, he's impervious, but...
His eyes are impervious, too. The logic is there. And there's a scene, it's at the end when there's the earthquake, all the glass and all the skyscrapers are breaking, and Superman flies through and uses his heat vision to destroy all the glass before it falls on the ground and cuts everybody. There are moments in this movie that work. But there are many more moments in this movie that do not work.
Like when the whole tunnel's on fire and he uses his ice breath to blow it out?
Yeah. Man, Brandon Routh is so flat in this. I think he was cast because he looked like Christopher Reeves, not because he was an actor. He's just so bland. He has no charisma, has no sense of humor. He's just a piece of wood. He's Keanu Reeves' level of stiffness. And Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane, first off, she looked anorexic in this movie.
She has a pretty face, but a horrible actress.
She's not a bad actress. She's not very good in this movie, though. Her Lois is kind of bored and complacent and bitchy, really, really bitchy. And of course, the very famous scenes of Superman essentially stalking Lois. It's a criticism that's leveled towards this film all the time. People are always saying Superman's a stalker in this. It's a little creepy. Though if I had Superman's powers, I'd probably do that too. X-ray vision. I mean...
Well, if you had Superman's powers, they would invent lead underwear.
Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor is okay. Arguably, it's the best performance in the movie.
Yeah.
But even then, it's the exact same plot as the first film. Lex Luthor isn't gonna build a giant robot and hold the president ransom, or build a kryptonite-powered power suit and fight Superman. No, he's pulling a land ownership scheme. He's gonna make a new island out of kryptonite and charge people to live on it or something. He's gonna change the geography of the planet and make millions of dollars off of this. And he even has an annoying female sidekick that ruins his plot a couple of times. And the film even reuses archive footage of Marlon Brando as Jor-El. It's so beholden to the Donner films, and really that is not what this franchise needed at all. It needed a new start, it needed a fresh start. This film, it's so problematic. It wasn't a bomb, but it underperformed, especially since Warner Brothers had this movie absorb all of the costs they spent on those other 3 Superman movies that didn't get made. They really expected this movie to make like $500 million or whatever in order to recoup not only its production costs, but the production costs of the previous films that did not get made. I don't know why they ever expected that to realistically happen. We agree, and most people will agree, that we needed a new Superman, not a new Superman that's the same as the old Superman. Which is what we might be getting next year?
Hopefully.
Yeah, of course there's a new Superman movie in production. It's going to be called... I'm not sure if it's going to be called just The Man of Steel or Superman The Man of Steel. I don't know. I think they're going the Dark Knight route and just calling it The Man of Steel.
Which would be fine for me, because I like that title.
The new film, which is coming out next year, is being directed by Zack Snyder, who's a filmmaker I have a lot of problems with. And it's not just the slow motion, though that's part of it. Yeah, I like the Dawn of the Dead remake. You know, and even 300 wasn't too bad. I have a lot of problems with that movie's politics, but pretty entertaining as an action movie. Now, Watchmen is not a film we're going to discuss in depth tonight, but I had a lot of problems with Watchmen. Completely boneheaded. Never has an adaptation been so close to the source material, and yet so completely missed the point. And did you see Sucker Punch?
No, I did not see
it. It was a bit of a mess. And I just don't know if it's a good idea to entrust Superman to this guy, because Zack Snyder has the mentality of a 12-year-old boy, and everything is dark and gritty and grim. If you've seen the production stills from the movie, it's a very dark, serious Superman. There have been shots of Superman screaming and in the dark and looking pissed off, and this is not the visual aesthetic I want for the character at all.
Well, yeah, but then I'm the kind of polar opposite with this of Zack.
You think Superman should be brooding and angry and pissed off?
I don't know that he should be brooding, angry, and pissed off, but on the other hand, it might be what we need to kind of give the character a new start and redefine where the character is going, because apparently the campy, regular side of Superman is not working.
I think it's fine redefining the character. I just don't think this is the redefinition we need.
Why are you trolling me right now?
The thing about this movie that I feel will be good is the fact that it's going to have a lot of action in it. Superman's going to be punching people. Not just because Zod is the bad guy, but because it's directed by Zack Snyder, whose movies are action-heavy to the point of ignoring other things like plot and character development. But the cast is good. Henry Cavill, we saw Immortals.
Which was awesome.
It was a good film, but it really didn't give us a good beat on him as an actor. He seemed very angry and pissed off in that role in that film. I'm uncertain about him, but the rest of the cast is pretty good. Amy Adams as Lois Lane is perfect, in my opinion. Michael Shannon, I'm a huge fan of Michael Shannon, so I'm really looking forward to his role as Zod. Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White is interesting. That could work. I feel like maybe he's a little young to play that part, but, you know, I could see it working. I'm cautiously optimistic about Superman, Man of Steel. Really more unoptimistic at this point, but who knows? I would love to eat my words in this scenario.
As far as Zod goes, in case anybody from Warner Brothers is listening, it should have been Gerard Butler.
It should have been Gerard Butler as Zod, so he could go to the president and say, "Kneel before Zod!" and kick him into the Phantom Zone.
Exactly. That's how that shit would work.
It should have happened. It should have happened. So that's it for the Superman franchise. Now, before we move on to the next big series, Batman was a huge, enormous cultural phenomenon. And it really caused a lot of people to say, okay, well, we got to greenlight every superhero script we have on the books. Out of this period, a lot of interesting films emerged in the early 90s. Now, if I was a studio executive in the early 90s, I would be saying, well, let's greenlight iconic characters like Spider-Man and Captain America, Wonder Woman, etc. But the characters that were getting movies made in the early 90s were older characters, pulp characters like the Shadow and the Phantom, which is odd. Why do you think that is? Was it just because the studio executives were so old that those were the only superheroes they remembered? Or was it because the more iconic characters had their rights tied up in various development deals?
I'm thinking it's more along the lines of that.
Yeah, maybe.
It might have been easier for like a comic company to sell the right of a less known character.
Yeah, that is probably true. It's probably cheaper. A movie we're going to talk about briefly is a film that's very near and dear to both our hearts. Really a part of our childhood. We got to do the song. What? Which song? The theme song or Ninja Rap?
The theme song. Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes on the half shell. Turtle power. Now, I don't know if you listeners remember, but in the early 90s, TMNT, as nerds call it, was really a pop culture phenomenon. I don't know what the kids are into today, but in my days it was basically Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, Pokemon.
And Batman.
Batman was an older phenomenon, but...
I don't care. Batman. Batman made my 90s.
Ninja Turtles started out as a very dark and gritty comic book in the 80s. It was kind of a dark satire of Daredevil and the X-Men. And somehow it became this really goofy kids show with the Turtles were obsessed with pizza and Shredder was a comic relief villain that was ineffectual. Out of that emerged this movie in 1999, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from New Line Cinema. May they rest in peace. Really, this film, I feel, balances the goofier elements from the cartoon show with the darker elements from the comics pretty successfully. Premise is ridiculous. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Just the fucking title makes you go, what the hell is that? But somehow this movie actually kind of makes it work. It sort of makes it seem plausible. Believable, if not plausible.
I love the movie.
I rewatched it recently, and it holds up surprisingly well. It's very successful.
Yeah, the makeup and the turtle suits.
Yeah, the Jim Henson Creature Shop did the effects in this film, and they're very good.
Yes, I could probably walk up to that today and think that was a real Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
Yeah, it holds up.
Like, there's no seams, like where the mask was put on. It's really good.
And I love Elias Kotas as Casey Jones is hilarious. That scene where him and Raphael fight, you don't know what cricket is unless you know what a crumpet is. That shit is great.
Weren't you the one telling me that Corey Feldman was...
Corey Feldman was the voice of Donatello in the first and third Ninja Turtle movies. The Shredder is scary as shit in this movie. He is such an effective villain. And he doesn't do anything. He shows up like midway through the film and has that initiation sequence in the Foot Clan. And then he shows up at the end and kicks some ass before going down. He really doesn't do a lot. But just the way he's always in shadow and he has this scary voice and this really cool costume.
It pisses me off that they killed him off in the second movie. Because I think he would have been a villain that could have easily transferred over into a third film and still would have made it work.
You can't really get rid of the Shredder. He's really the only important villain the Turtles have got.
And as much as I love the second movie, I have to say... The Super Shredder was... I love the movie, but that was a really over-the-top idea.
Well,
was that even in the comics?
No, though you say that Super Shredder is over the top, and yet minutes earlier, Michelangelo launches Shredder through a window by doing a power rip on a guitar that causes the amplifier Shredder is standing on to
But that's awesome! That's awesome!
You can handle the super guitar riff, but Super Shredder... Oh man, I can't take Super Shredder. Getting back to the first movie, the final scene where the Shredder comes down and kicks the shit out of all the Turtles very easily. Splinter shows up, and it's a little ridiculous, the Shredder's vendetta against Splinter. Like, when he takes off the mask, he's not horribly deformed. It's just kind of like 3 cuts on his face. It's really not something you could probably cover with some mascara, Shredder.
He was dishonored.
It was an honor thing. The Shredder's got this weird...
Asians in their honor.
They're Japanese people in their honor. The Shredder's got kind of a stabby, slicey pole thing. And he goes running at Splinter, and Splinter grabs the pole with the nunchucks and flips him, and so he's on the edge of the building. And Splinter delivers some of the best dialogue ever in a movie about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and says, "Death comes through us all, Usagi Yojimbo," or whatever his name was.
Orokosaki.
Orokosaki, fucking nerd. Death comes for us all, Orokosaki. But the difference is, when death comes for you, and he pulls a knife and he tries to throw it at Splinter, and Splinter lets go of the nunchucks, and he goes falling off the building and lands in the back of the trash truck.
And Casey Jones accidentally leans on the lever.
and it crushes, and you see the helmet squish. And then Splinter says, "When you go, it will be without honor." As a kid, that is the coldest shit you can say to a motherfucker when you grease him, okay?
Yeah, but then no, but like before that, they're like trying to think of something to say or something, right? And he goes, "I've always liked cowabunga" or something.
Cowabunga. I've always liked cowabunga. I made a funny.
And then at the end of the second movie, he says, "I made another funny." And that shit wasn't in the third film.
We won't talk about
was Splinter even in the third film?
I do not remember, dude. It has been so long since I've seen that movie.
If he wasn't, that was stupid.
I feel number 2 is way too cartoony. You know, the first movie, when the Turtles fight the Foot Clan in the subway, they shatter the light bulb with Raph's sigh, and they go in and they kick ass in the shadow like ninjas are supposed to. In the second movie, they're in clear light, and Michelangelo beats up a bunch of thugs with a yo-yo.
Going around the world!
And
Donatello acts like the punching bag.
Yeah, and there's an annoying Asian kid sidekick. Well, he's not a kid, he's a teenager, but he's annoying. I just feel like the second movie is way more cartoony and doesn't hold up as well.
I actually like that character.
You would.
Well, no, because it gives Raph a friend that he actually likes to talk to.
Raphael is always such an asshole in all Turtles media. It doesn't matter if it's the comics.
Well, you know what? You don't know what a cricket is if you don't know what a crumpet is.
And the third movie is a mystery to me. It has been
needless to say, they go back in time to fight samurai.
They go back in time to feudal Japan, and there's an evil Englishman. I have not seen it since I was a child and remember next to nothing.
Let's not forget the 1997 live-action Ninja Turtles
The Next
show.
Mutation. I remember that shit. I loved it at the time, but I don't know how I'd react to it now.
Well, it's on Netflix Instant View.
Oh, shit. I guess I know what I'm watching tonight. And, of course, there was the animated movie a couple years ago, TMNT, which I thought was pretty good. Still kind of overly kid-friendly in spots, but I thought was pretty successful.
And even though the Shredder wasn't in it, I didn't so much miss it.
I wasn't all that crazy about the plot with the mystic beast and all of that, but I thought they got the dynamic in between the turtles themselves. I thought they got that down, and I liked that. And I liked Mako as Splinter, and I liked Sarah Michelle Gellar as April O'Neil. Sadly, that film did not get a sequel, even though it was successful, because the studio that produced it went out of business. And now there's another new film, another new live-action Ninja Turtles movie in development, and it's being developed by Michael Bay's Platinum Dune studio.
No shit, I didn't know that.
And this is because there's a new cartoon coming out on Nickelodeon in a couple of months.
Well, I'll definitely be going to go see that live-action Ninja Turtle movie if the world doesn't end.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that, because Michael Bay's involvement makes me skeptical.
Well, it'll be giant robot turtles.
Giant robot turtles.
Go Ninja, go Ninja, go! 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 Go, 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 go! Lyric.
As we were talking about earlier, there were a lot of pulp heroes being adapted in the early 90s. The Rocketeer, have you seen it recently?
I haven't seen it recently, but I have seen it. It's pretty interesting.
It's good. It holds up. It was a Disney production, and it wasn't successful because it had the misfortune of opening the same day as Terminator 2. First off, it really nails that retro feeling extremely well. The Rocketeer was directed by Joe Johnston, who went on to direct Captain America. And I think he got that job because of The Rocketeer, because both of those movies really have that period detail down pat.
Oh, yeah. And it was really good.
And the cast in this is great. You have Bill Campbell, who's not Bruce Campbell, I'll remind you. He plays the main hero, and Jennifer Connelly, at the peak of her early 90s hotness, wearing many low-cut dresses, plays his love interest, and Timothy Dalton plays the bad guy, who is basically Errol Flynn if Errol Flynn was a Nazi spy. And he's wonderful. You have a Rondo Hatan-style henchman called Gruesome. There are a couple scenes that are maybe a little goofy. There's a scene where a truck gets stuck in the mud, I think, and the Rocketeer uses his jetpack to get it to move. But overall, the special effects in this movie hold up as well. The scene where the Rocketeer comes out and saves the airplane from crashing at the air show is very exciting and works extremely well. And the big climactic scene on the Zeppelin that was hiding behind the Hollywood sign is awesome. And there's a wonderful scene. We find out that basically the Nazis are trying to steal this jetpack, which was built by Howard Hawks, played by Terry O'Quinn of the Stepfather fame. Basically, this group of gangsters have been working with Timothy Dalton's character, and when he reveals the fact that he's working for the Nazis, these gangsters go, well, we might be crooks, but we are American crooks, and turn on him.
And then all is right with the world.
I enjoy this movie a lot. I feel that it's a bit of an underseen, I guess you could call it a cult classic. I wish it would have become a franchise.
It's probably been a good 15 years since I've seen this movie.
Well, you should seek it out. I'd highly recommend The Rocketeer. It's a good one. Now, The Shadow came out in 1994.
I've seen this one recently.
Okay, I'm a big fan of the Shadow character.
I like the movie a lot.
It's not bad. It has some moments that are very successful. I feel there are problematic issues, but I like parts of the film a lot. I'm a big fan of the Shadow. I've read a couple of the novels. I've listened to the radio show. He was sort of proto-Batman in a lot of ways. He was designed as a hero that had aspects of a villain. In the original novels, the Shadow tends to kill the people that he's going after. There weren't a lot of reoccurring villains in the original Shadow books because they usually die at the end of the story. The concept, even in the 90s, was well known of what evil lurks in the hearts of men. The Shadow knows. That was the catchphrase on the radio show. It was a big deal back in the 40s and 50s when radio shows were still popular. And there had been movie serials and a couple different comics. But this movie, parts of it are pretty good. Alec Baldwin, man, what the hell happened to him? I mean, these days he's this fat guy who's known for comedy. But in the early 90s he was considered a sexy leading man.
He's really let himself go. Did you know that Ian McKellen was in that?
Yes, he's in it. Yeah, he plays the scientist, and Penelope Ann Miller is great as the love interest, Margot Lane. Jonathan Winters has a small part in the movie. I feel like they mostly get the concept of the Shadow right. I like how they display his powers on screen. That early scene where they're on the bridge and you can just kind of see an outline moving, beating up the guys. Really good Jerry Goldsmith score, by the way. And Tim Curry's in this movie.
Yes.
Tim Curry plays a henchman. And the scene where the Shadow basically drives Tim Curry's character insane and drives him to suicide really is indicative of what this character is. Yeah. He's a dark hero. They've kind of retconned it where Batman scares the shit out of people. That's what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to be frightening the criminals. Well, the Shadow did that shit first. His whole...
but Batman does it better, bitch. Take it back.
His whole modus operandi is frightening criminals into revealing themselves. There are parts of the movie that I feel don't work all that well. There's some early CGI, which does not look good. I feel like the flashback-heavy first act, where we really kind of get the origin for the Shadow, kind of tourniquets the pacing some. But there are some wonderful scenes at the end where the bomb is rolling down the hallways, and Ian McKellen and Penelope Ann Miller are trying to save it. And
yeah, that's pretty good. I like that.
That's good. I like the final confrontation with the bad guy, Shao Wei Khan. That Hall of Mirrors sequence works very well.
He's flat out Genghis Khan.
He's Shao Wei Khan. He's the modern descendant of Genghis Khan.
God, how long has it been since you've seen the movie? He's actually Genghis Khan. When they bring him out of the sarcophagus, he starts calling himself Shao Wei Khan, the modern descendant of Genghis Khan. But he's actually Genghis Khan.
I'm pretty sure you're wrong about this.
I'm pretty sure I'm right, because I just watched this movie like a month ago.
Well, I saw it pretty recently, too, and I question that statement you just made. James Hong is in this, too, because it has a Chinese sequence, and you can't have Chinese characters without James Hong showing up. Peter Boyle, this movie has a wonderful cast. Directed by Russell McCauley, who did Highlander, one of my all-time favorite movies.
I have an appreciation for the Highlander movies, but I don't like them.
I enjoy The Shadow. Again, another film that wasn't successful, and I wish it had made a franchise. I feel like the first film is good, a little shaky in spots. A sequel would have been better. And really, with the exception of Ninja Turtles, none of these early 90s superhero movies was not as successful as they wanted it to be. The Phantom wasn't successful, Rocketeer, Shadow, none of these movies were hits.
I like The Phantom.
I haven't actually seen The Phantom. I want to see it because it's got Christy Swanson in it during...
Well, as a matter of fact, that one is on Instant View.
I think I will watch that. Besides from the Batman franchise, which was huge in the 90s, there really weren't any other attempts to make a superhero movie that were successful. And it wasn't until the late 90s when Blade came out and was a sizable hit. And Blade wasn't a well-known character at all. In fact, the movie version is way more well-known than the comic version. But that film was successful enough for Marvel to say, well, we should start getting into developing our characters. And the first movie to come out of those development deals was the next franchise we're going to talk about, which is
X-Men.
X-Men. Now, JD, from my understanding, you're a fan of the X-Men universe.
Oh, I love the X-Men.
Now, where does that start? Is that from the 90s cartoon show? Was that your first exposure to these characters?
Actually, yes, it was.
Yeah, and you have a major hard-on for Jean Grey?
Yeah. She's a hot babe with ultimate power, with red hair and green eyes. I mean, what is not to love about the character? Sorry, I have a thing for redheads with green eyes.
I'm more of a Kitty Pryde guy. This first X-Men movie, now, from what I remember, it kind of came out of nowhere. I don't really remember reading a lot or hearing a lot about this movie before it came out. I just remember seeing commercials like X-Men. It's like, oh wow, they made an X-Men movie, because I too had watched the 90s cartoon show, and I, of course, was a comic book nerd, so I knew who these characters were, and I was not on the internet all day like I am now, back in the late 90s.
And I think the first film was rather successful in trying to get through what characters it could into the film and doing enough with them.
This is a team movie. You can't really do an origin for everybody. That would just take up too much time. So you just kind of have to go on faith that you know who Cyclops is, you know who Storm is, you know who Jean Grey is. You just kind of have to take it and go with it. Because if they tried to stop the movie and tell you who these characters were, it would ruin the pacing of the film.
Yeah, I agree there.
Now, my biggest issue with the X-Men series is this whole thing of making Wolverine the main character. Because, you know, Wolverine wasn't even originally in the X-Men, even though I know he's the face of the series and was on every comic book cover in the 90s. This first movie has some wonderful scenes in it. That opening shot of Magneto as a teenager in the prison camps works very well.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
This is a very moodily shot movie. I like the tone of the film. It's handled very well. I like the look of the film. Though I have some qualms with the cast, overall the cast for the film is very good. This was kind of the movie that made Hugh Jackman a huge star.
It pretty much was.
Yeah, no, it was.
He was a nobody until this movie.
Yeah, he wasn't well known. What is your opinion on his interpretation of Wolverine? Lots of people say... You don't like his version of Wolverine?
I don't like his version of Wolverine.
Why is that?
For starters, he's too tall.
He's too tall. He's not hairy enough.
That's an easy fix with prosthetics and all that.
He needs to glue some yak hair to his face.
He's not a very good actor.
I think Hugh Jackman's a fine actor, and I feel like as these films have gone on, his characterization has gotten weaker, but I don't know, I don't really have any major issues with his
he wasn't
take on
angry
Wolverine.
enough.
That's true. He's not quite crazy, insane berserker Wolverine.
You know, and he didn't have a Canadian accent.
He didn't have a Canadian accent, no.
And even in the comic books, Wolverine had a Canadian accent.
Yeah, I'm not a big enough nerd that it bothers me. There's some spot-on casting, like Patrick Stewart as Professor X. Who else would have played it?
Yeah, you're never going to top that.
He was perfect for that role, and Ian McKellen as Magneto is extremely good.
I don't think I could pick anybody else for Magneto, really.
I don't know. It would be hard to find somebody else to play that part as well. It was not a choice I would have gone with right off the top of my head, but I don't know, he made it work. He was good in the role. You know, Ian McKellen's a good actor, so he just kind of makes it work anyway.
Yeah, especially as Gandalf. Just throwing it out there.
You know, and even Anna Paquin as Rogue, though, the version of Rogue I know is a, 6-foot-something Amazon who can fly and throw buses around. So seeing her as kind of a meek teenager was not what I was expecting, but it works for the purpose of the movie. And of course, it's a plot point in the movie itself, important to the climax of the film.
Yeah, you can get around that. So.
Yeah, the special effects in the movie hold up. It's not really a special effects heavy. It's not like the special effects heavy movies we have now, which are just huge and have crazy shit happening all the time. This movie's a little subtler. It's a little quieter than what you might expect.
Yeah, but all around I think it works well, for being a team movie. And it's like the first team superhero movie that I can think of.
Pretty much, yeah. The first one to really work. Though Halle Berry, I'm not a fan, and I think her Storm is incredibly flat.
You know it's bad when the directors tell her to just stop doing the accent because it's not working.
Yeah.
In the comics and in the old cartoon, when Storm did her thing, it was like she was saying a magic spell. There was none of that. Like, there was no characterization at all for Storm, other than I look up to the sky and summon a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
She didn't have an African accent, but that's just because she wasn't working.
Because Halle Berry can't act. I like Famke Jensen as Jean Grey, by the way. She's pretty good in the part. And the action in the movie is good. The train station attack with Sabretooth and Toad. Would you think nowadays you could buy a ridiculous character like Toad in a movie? That character is so ridiculous. And the movie just kind of says, deal with it. He's a frog man. It's the most stupid concept ever.
Yeah, but he's also one of the most iconic X-Men characters.
Well, he was one of the original villains in the Brotherhood of Evil, yeah. But it just surprises me he made it in the movie. And, he works. Ray Park, Darth Maul playing him.
He even does some staff work in that movie.
Yeah, he does. I feel like the plot is pretty successful, even though they make Rogue the plot puppy for the film. It doesn't bother me. Overall, I like the first X-Men. It's not a great film, but it works. Did you know this, that Josh Whedon did some dialogue work on this film? Some uncredited dialogue work?
No, I was not aware.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty easy to go through the film and pick out the stuff that's his. Like when Wolverine walks for the metal detector and stabs it and then uses his claws to flick off Cyclops.
Yeah, that's definitely
Josh Whedon. Or the line about, how do I know it's you? You're a dick. Okay. Or, you know what happens when a frog gets struck by lightning?
You know what happens to a toad when he gets struck by lightning?
The same thing that happens to everything else.
Even as a kid, I was like, wow, that's a horrible...
And Storm flat out fucking kills that dude. Now, the costumes, JD. From my understanding, you have a couple choice words to say about the costumes in this movie.
They're fucking stupid.
You don't like the black leather?
They're jumpsuits. There's barely even anything on there that symbolizes X-Men. They have a couple X's. They're
not even really called X-Men in this movie. That's the thing about superhero movies. They tend to not use code names. At the beginning of the movie, Professor Xavier says he's also known as Cyclops and she's also known as Storm. And then Wolverine makes that quip, what do they call you, Wheels? I feel like that's probably a Josh Whedon line, too. Any of the snarky dialogue is Josh Whedon, probably. The costumes, they lampshade that when Wolverine says, well, do you think yellow spandex would have worked or whatever?
I know that it wouldn't look good on a movie, but I just don't understand what is so hard about taking a costume from a comic book and putting it onto a movie.
I don't think Wolverine's costume, as displayed in the comics, would translate.
There was other variations of his costume. I don't like the no mask.
You really want him to have the mask. What about the crazy pins that go over his crazy hair?
The thing of it is, they're mutants that
is the hair part of his mutation?
that are on the run from...
Yeah, but Jean Grey never wore a mask, at least not anytime recently.
Okay, well, fuck with her. See what happens. I
mean, Storm never wore a mask.
Okay, she can summon lightning bolts from her fingertips. Fuck with her.
She's got force lightning. But would you say you like this film despite those qualms? Despite the fact that you don't like Hugh Jackman and you don't like the costumes?
I would like the films, except for the third one, but we all know my beef one there, and we'll talk about that when we get to it.
Yeah, this movie was successful, and it really kind of opened the gates for superhero films as we know them today. The fact that there's a new one every year, and they're just inescapable, to the point where a diehard nerd like myself was almost sick of it. So when X2 came out, it was kind of exciting. First off, I was excited for the movie because it had Nightcrawler in it, who's one of my favorite characters from the comics, and I felt like he's brought to life extremely well. Would you say that X2 is a better movie than the first one?
Yes.
I'm kind of a mixed opinion on that. I feel from a writing standpoint, it's heads and shoulders better than the first movie. The first movie, it's not as bad as the original Batman, which has almost no plot. But there's a lot of stuff you have to go through. Like I said, you have to sort of introduce these characters, and you don't get a lot of development for Cyclops or Storm. And that continues in this movie. Cyclops is barely in X2.
Which is fine with me, because I don't
The
so
James
much care for the
Marsden
character.
version of Cyclops is pretty boring. He's not very interesting.
Well, I think the Cyclops character in general is just a boring character.
Well, it depends on how he's written.
And again, I think he's a rather boring character.
I feel like the first film is a little sloppy as far as its writing goes, and the second movie has a very tight plot, and it works extremely well. However, it's a very serious film, to the point where it's almost kind of a downer how heavy and serious the film is. And I feel like it sort of missed that element of fun that the first movie had. First off, the opening scene of Nightcrawler in the president's office works so well.
Yes.
It really shows you how dynamic that character's powers are. Brian Cox, whom I'm a big fan of, Brian Cox as Stryker is a great villain. Uh-oh. JD's got a problem.
If they were going to do a sequel, they should have a big, really downer with these movies, is that they don't use any of the really big, iconic, with the exception of the first one, they don't use any of the really big, iconic X-Men villains.
I know. You want Apocalypse and you want Sinister.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be Apocalypse or Sinister. I mean, Omega Red, Sauron,
the living monolith. Why wasn't there a good version of the Blob in any of these movies? That's what I want to know.
Or yeah, like the Blob.
That was always a character I remembered from the cartoon show for some reason. We never really got him in the movie, and when we did, it was a very different, screwed up interpretation of that character. So you feel like instead of going with somebody boring like Stryker, they should have had crazy, uber-powerful Apocalypse come out of a pyramid and start shooting laser beams at his fingers and grow to giant size. And
sure, why not? It worked in Crank 2.
Well, I think there are some things Crank 2 gets away with.
Let the guys who did Crank 2 do an X-Men movie. That's what I want to see.
It is a problem that Cyclops is basically disappears midway through the film and doesn't show up again until the very end. That's a weakness in the script. But there are just some fantastic sequences in this movie, like Magneto's escape from his plastic prison.
When he sucks the iron out of that guy's blood.
There's a little too much iron in your diet. Yeah! And he makes the little balls of iron into a disc that he can float off and throws them through the walls, and it just fucking shit up.
Even though I dislike they dumb Magneto down to just master over magnetism,
he doesn't have ability to move planets in this movie. Sorry, he's still pretty awesome.
They still do a pretty good job of making him a badass.
Like in the first movie where he has the stop the bullets right in front of the people's heads.
Exactly. Or in the third film when he lifts up the whole entire
bridge, yeah,
and he lifts up the whole bridge and moves it.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And he's throwing cars and
he does some badass shit in these movies. The sequence where, well, he's not called Pyro yet, but he'll become Pyro, where he really kind of goes over to the dark side in front of the Summers house, and he's blowing up police cars.
But he doesn't have an Australian accent, and he's not blonde.
Oh, who cares? That shit's not important. Pyro is not an important character. He's the first boss in the X-Men arcade game. He's not an important character. Pyro will turn you into toast. Should we just go ahead and get the X-Men video game quotes out of the way?
Welcome to die, X-Chicken.
You are dead. Nothing can move the blob.
I am the master of magnet.
Moving on. That scene where Wolverine gets shot in the head and then the bullet just kind of gets slowly pushed out. That was the first time I said, whoa now. Talk about overpowered. Especially in Wolverine Origins when they say, oh, you cut their heads off to kill them. Wouldn't a bullet to the brain kind of accomplish the same things? Nah. But I think Brian Cox as Stryker is great. I think Alan Cummings as Nightcrawler is perfect. I like the mind control plot. I feel like that works really well. The scene where Magneto says to Professor X as he's in the second Cerebro and says, kill all the humans. You know, it seems almost over the top. That's how cold Magneto is. I feel like they've softened that character over the years. Sometimes he's a good guy, sometimes he's a bad guy, but really, I feel Magneto works best when he's this extremist who says, we're the next step of evolution, all you humans get the fuck out of our way.
Exactly. I think that's when he works best, too. Also, when he's shooting ion beams out of his hands, too. Which he doesn't do in the movies.
No ion beams. In my opinion, X2, technically a stronger film than the first one. Maybe not as much fun. I still feel like this is a pretty good movie.
Yeah, I like the second one better than the first one.
Over the last 4 or 5 years, there have been a lot of superhero movies, and for many people, I feel like the definitive, exciting superhero movies have probably been the Dark Knight series. But for me, superhero movies have been really kicking ass and doing the characters the way I want to see them have been the self-produced Marvel films.
I agree.
Great.
Big of a fan of Batman as I am.
Yeah, I'm really more of a DC guy, but I gotta say, I really am really into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as they call it.
These movies that they do now got perfect casting, pretty much perfect art direction and everything. Like, I mean, it's
what
just...
I love about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is it's really exactly that. In the comics, these characters coexist. Spider-Man lives in the same city as the Fantastic Four. Iron Man hangs out with Captain America. They're all in the same universe together, and what happens in one comic affects the rest of the comics. Before, in movies, we couldn't do that because they were all owned by other studios, even though Warner Brothers, since they own DC flat out, had a perfect opportunity to do that. They have chosen not to. By starting their own studio and making films for the properties they own, Marvel has allowed themselves to do that. So when you watch Iron Man, you have Nick Fury come in. You have Tony Stark has the Captain America shield in his auto shop. And the Incredible Hulk, you have Tony Stark showing up at the end talking about the Avengers. You have this Agent Coulson character in almost all of the movies. That's so wonderful. It really makes one of the best things about the comics translate over to the film, and they've done it extremely successfully.
Take Iron Man.
Well, let's start with Iron Man. That was the first one.
Can you honestly think of anyone better to play Tony Stark than Robert Downey Jr.?
There was a lot riding on this movie. First off, it was Marvel's first self-produced production, and Iron Man is not a top-tier character. Well, he is now, but he wasn't at the time. He was kind of a B-lister. I'd say he was even lower than Green Lantern was. Robert Downey Jr. was kind of washed up at the time. When I first heard the casting, my initial thought was like, oh, well, when they get to the alcoholism part of the character, that's going to be perfect. You know, Robert Downey Jr. was very famous for his indiscretions. He's completely perfect as Iron Man.
He looks like him, sounds like him.
Has the same sort of wit, because let's face it, in the comics, Iron Man is a pretty big prick most of the time. You know, people have pointed out some logic holes in the first movie, like, okay, Tony Stark tries to destroy all the weapons in the world by making a really, really better weapon. You can't make peace by making more violence. That scene in the first Iron Man when he really puts on the Mark III suit for the first time, and he flies over to Afghanistan and drops down in the middle of a war zone and fucking kills the shit out of all the terrorists, and makes me think, holy shit, I wish that guy existed in real life. We'd be able to solve our problems so much easier.
I know, right? Jeez.
It really got at the wish fulfillment aspect of the superhero concept. In superhero comics, there are no great disasters because Superman's always there to save the day. And we don't have that in real life. However, in the comics, we can have this perfect hero, well, not necessarily perfect, but a hero come out of the sky and single-handedly save the day. And that one scene in Iron Man really got at what is so powerful about that concept.
I don't know that I could say much more about it. It had great action sequences, but blended it well with telling the story.
You know what's interesting is there really aren't that many action sequences in this movie. There are like 4 action scenes in the whole film. There's a scene where he puts on the Mark I suit, and that is so fucking awesome. When he busts out of that cave and the goddamn Black Sabbath song is playing, it's like, fuck yes. And
I know when I was in the theater, people cheered.
Yes! And then there's the scene where he goes to Afghanistan and fights the terrorists, and the jet scene after that, which might even be counted as the same sequence, depending on how you look at it. And then there's the scene at the end where he fights Ironmonger. And those are really it. I remember being a little itty-bitty disappointed in the movie at the time, because All those scenes were in the trailer. What Marvel has really done with their self-produced films is really make them all character-oriented. They get it. They don't have to say, oh, well, this movie needs a love story to bring in the women. No. Iron Man works because Tony Stark is a good character, and the way he's played by Robert Downey Jr. is great. They take a good character. They write a script centered around that character. They cast the right actor in the part, and they make the movie about that one character. And that's why all of these films are very singular and very focused and very good. The first Iron Man, I love the special effects in this. Stan Winston, who is one of the best special effects men to ever have lived, this was the last thing he really worked on. The way they combine practical effects with CGI effects is almost seamless. You can't really tell when Iron Man is a real suit and when it's a CGI creation. This movie made me fucking like Gwyneth Paltrow, okay?
And as we know from Contagion, Gwyneth Paltrow is the reason the world ends.
Yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow is gonna kill us all. On paper, Jeff Bridges, I mean, he's the fucking dude, but he works as the bad guy. The thing with Iron Man that they really had an opportunity with is, yeah, Iron Man's got a rogue gallery in the comics, but it's characters like the Milter and Blizzard and even Whiplash that really, a dude with whips going up against Iron Man who's a walking warhead, really none of his villains, even the Mandarin.
Don't crack on the Mandarin.
I'll just say, none of Iron Man's enemies can beat him in a fight. But they've done a good job with the movies of creating villains that are effective. They never call him Ironmonger in the movie. That's who he is. And that suit is awesome looking, by the way. That's totally badass.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's badass.
In the first film, anyway, they did a really good job of, here's a brand new universe, let's play with our toys in it. And even though people say the theme of the film, that Tony Stark essentially goes from being a warmonger to being a pacifist, is totally busted and broken because, oh, how am I supposed to stop all the weapons in the world from being created by, making a weapon that's way better than the other one? It's a broken Aesop, perhaps, but I don't know, that scene when he first comes back from the Middle East and he's eating the cheeseburger at the press conference, it works. I feel like the movie's sincere, even if maybe it misses its own point. But who gives a shit, because stuff blows up real good.
There's enough explosions in there to keep me entertained, so.
Now, the same year Iron Man came out, Marvel also rebooted The Hawk with The Incredible Hulk. Now, what do you think about this movie, JD?
I like it. It's better than the original one, that's for sure.
I agree with that, definitely. It is, by a wide margin, the superior film.
I'm not a fan of Edward Norton. No, he worked good in this movie. It's just, I'm not a fan.
The Hawk is kind of a problem for a live-action movie because the star of your show is a CGI creation. When they recast the part for the Avengers, my thought was like, well, does it even really matter?
Yeah, you need the Hulk for 90% of the movie.
Yeah,
anyways.
And that's really sort of an issue when the bulk of your film is going to be CGI things bumping into each other. Bruce Banner is a problematic character, too, because when he's written bad, he comes off as kind of a passive-aggressive pussy. But this movie makes it work. I thought his relationship with Betty was well handled, though Liv Taylor, she is flat in everything. How did she become such a big star?
Lord of the Rings.
I just rewatched this movie a couple days ago, and wow, Liv Taylor is flat in this. And she's flat in everything. The girl can't act. She's cardboard. And yet,
she got popular because of two reasons. She's Steven Tyler's daughter, and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
You gotta admit, Lord of the Rings made her career.
Something I bitch about the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, yes, people, I didn't like The Dark Knight, you're going to hear about this more in a couple of months, is that Christopher Nolan is completely resistant to making the movies a fun comic book experience. There are no in-jokes, no inside references, no setups for sequel. Christopher Nolan's films are serious business, and there's no fun to be had, guys. But in The Incredible Hulk, you've got stuff like, they set up the leader in the movie. Doc Samson is in the movie. You have references to Captain America with the super soldier formula. You have all of these references to different things that go on in the universe, and it makes these movies all feel cohesive, first off. And secondly, it makes it feel like you're watching a chapter from a larger story, and I love that.
Enough said.
I feel like the Hawk goes on a little long at the end. The fight scene at the end between him and the Abomination goes on too long. And I don't like the Abomination makeup. Online, somebody took the makeup from the movie and added the forehead ridges and the little goblin ears that he has in the comics, and it was perfect. So if they just could have done that in the movie, it would have been great. However, whatever, it's not a big enough issue to ruin.
The only gripe I have with it is that it's just too long.
It's not even that long. It's under 2 hours. And
but I mean, it just feels like it's sucking your life out.
It goes on a little long. But there are some cool-ass sequences. The scene where the Hawk goes nuts on the college campus, awesome.
Oh, yeah. He front kicks the tank or the guy.
Yeah, he front kicks Tim Roth into a tree. The scene at the end where Tim Roth has become the Abomination and is tearing up what's supposed to be New York York, but is very obviously downtown Toronto. And they drop Edward Norton out of the helicopter, and he explodes out of the ground as the Hawk. Yes. Speaking of cool in-jokes, you have things in this movie like the music from the 1970s TV show plays at one point, the Lonely Man theme, and the scene where he picks up the purple pants and says no. Or the end when he goes, Hawk smash. It's like, fuck yes!
How hard is it to write that line into a movie?
And I know maybe it's ridiculous, maybe it doesn't make any sense, but who fucking gives a shit? It's awesome!
Hawk smash!
Even having Lou Ferrigno come back as the voice of the Hawk. This movie, and the Marvel films in general, does that kind of thing right. And I feel like that's missing from a lot of other studios. The Hawk is not as good as a film as Iron Man. No way. But it's pretty entertaining, and I feel like it's a good setup for the character. And I wish it had been more successful, because I would have watched the Hawk too. Obviously, we're seeing him in the Avengers, but I would have watched a second solo movie.
Well, who knows? We might get one after the
We
Avengers.
might get one, yeah.
That's assuming if the world doesn't end.
Yeah, assuming. In 2010, we got Iron Man 2. Now, earlier I said there was one film in this cycle that I thought was weak, and it's this one. Now, what do you say about Iron Man 2, JD?
I still like it. Do I like it as good as Iron Man? No, but I do like it.
The problem with this movie is it's trying to do way too much. These are all the plots you have going on in this movie. Tony Stark is dying of cancer from his arc reactor, and he's trying to fix that. You have Mickey Rourke as a character who's a combination of the Crimson Dynamo and Whiplash. He has a personal vendetta against Tony Stark, and he's going after him. You have Sam Rockwell as Hammer, a rival industrialist to Tony Stark who's trying to steal his formulas, blackmail him, and destroy him on a corporate level. You have this love story between Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, and with her taking over the company. You have Nick Fury showing up and setting up the Avengers. You have Black Widow showing up for really no reason.
Other than to give her
Look
reason to be-
fantastic.
I mean, I wouldn't mind getting Julia Conrad by Scarlett Johansson.
So basically the movie is trying to do too much. If you thought there wasn't enough action in the first movie, there was definitely not enough action in this one.
Now, see, I beg to differ on that.
Really?
one.
There's
I
like
think-
2 action scenes in the movie.
Now, I think there's more action.
Really? There's the fight scene on the racetrack, and then there's the big climactic scene at the end. Oh, and the movie also sets up War Machine, so that's another plot thread. That's like 7 plots in the movie. And the movie stops in the middle for like a solid hour to get all these stories straight, and it's an issue.
There's less action sequences. It's like the last half hour of the movie alone is like
Maybe.
solid action.
In general, redemptive Tony Stark is not as fun as snarky Tony Stark. Wouldn't you agree that asshole Tony Stark is more entertaining than redemptive Tony Stark?
Yeah, but in general, assholes are more entertaining.
Having said that, Robert Downey Jr., and this is why Iron Man 2 works on any level, the cast is still fantastic. Don Cheadle is a step up from the first guy. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah.
The Roddy in Part 2 is so much better. I gotta say, I can't imagine... I don't even remember the dude's name. Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard in the first movie, I can't imagine him in the War Machine suit kicking ass. Don Cheadle makes it work. And him and Robert Downey Jr. have a better back and forth than he did with Terrence Howard.
Yeah. Although I will say that there's one person that I'd possibly like to see play War Machine better. And you'll probably disagree with me,
I'm certain I will.
but Wesley Snipes.
Oh, God. If they'd made Iron Man in 1995, then yes. I would have loved to have seen that.
Because I think back to Demolition Man when he played the bad.
Oh, yeah. I totally see where you're coming.
I mean, Demolition Man, Wesley Snipes in the Warhammer suit. Warhammer. War Machine.
I would have liked to have seen that. Not now, but like back in 1995, yes.
As long as he reverted back to
Well, he
his
couldn't have been in Iron Man 2 because he was in jail.
So? If Paris Hilton can get out...
Fly in Iron Man and have him bust him out of jail at the beginning of the movie.
Even better.
You know how I said earlier how one of the things I like about the Marvel-produced films is that there are in-jokes and references to these new characters. One of my problems with Iron Man 2 is that I feel like there isn't enough of that. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell are you talking about? The movie stops in the middle to become the prequel to the Avengers. Okay, the villain of the movie is pretty much a new character. He's a composite character. When he shows up on the racetrack with the electric whips and that fight scene with Tony Stark in the suitcase armor, that's cool. And he's Whiplash in that scene. However, the character's Russian and is also supposed to be the Crimson Dynamo. So when he shows up at the end of the movie in that big armor, would it have been too much to just paint that damn thing red? I would have been happy if they just painted the armor he wears at the movie bright red instead of the gray that it is. And it even fits the character's personality because the character is very flamboyant and showing he wants to destroy Tony Stark in public. That's his whole shtick. It would have made sense for him to have a red armor, and I would have been happy with that. And they didn't do that, so the villain comes off as kind of soft and uninteresting in this one, even though Mickey Rourke isn't bad in the part. You know, Mickey Rourke, just looking at him, he looks like he's gonna eat you, you know? He's just a creepy-looking dude with the weird hair, and he looks like he's been in prison a couple of times.
Mickey Rourke probably has been in prison a couple of times.
Iron Iron Man 2, it's problematic, but I'm not going to say I hate it. I would say I like the movie.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next one, because
But
the next one's my favorite.
Really?
Thus far.
You liked it this much?
Yes.
And this is a movie from last year, Thor.
Yes, I love this one.
That surprises me.
I mean, I really like Captain America. I think last year's movies definitely surpass all the rest of them.
Okay, let's talk about Thor. Now, this was an interesting character because Thor really, on a logical level, doesn't go with the rest of these characters. Iron Man, Hawk, Captain America are all sci-fi based. Thor is fantasy based. And the movie immediately gets around that by making them aliens. By making Asgard another dimension and making the Asgardians aliens. I mean, they don't come out and say that, but that's what they are. It's implied.
It's implied in the comics.
Well, yeah, but I really feel like the comics Thor is a magical character. Why, in this movie, they even have him say, where I come from, magic and science are the same thing. And that movie really makes that work. And it's an ambitious movie. I was surprised this film was successful because it is so comic booky. You've got a character named Frigga, and Laufey, and Loki, and Odin, and Heimdall, and the Warriors 3, and a Rainbow Bridge, Frost Giants, and Mjolnir, all of this stuff. And I know it all comes from original Norse mythology. However, when you put it in the mouths of actors like Anthony Hopkins, it comes out as a little ridiculous. As a comic book fan, obviously, I was ready for it, and it didn't bother me. But I was surprised the public went for it.
Well, I really liked the movie a lot.
Oh, I liked it a lot, too. Chris Hemsworth was great as Thor. Natalie Portman was very good as Jane, and the two have a romantic chemistry that works.
That's because I was watching an interview.
Oh, I know. In the interview, she was about to go down on him. I mean,
yes, Natalie Portman was hot for Chris Hemsworth, but
I'm a little hot for Chris Hemsworth, and I'm completely straight. So,
well,
I'm going to punch you in the judgment.
They really played to the campiness of the comic book.
The movie is a little campy, and I think it works.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
when you're talking about things like Frost Giants and Rainbow Bridges, you gotta grin a little bit.
Although I like the way that they adapted the Rainbow Bridge to make it not so rainbow-y.
Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't look ridiculous.
You know, it's not just a rainbow.
It doesn't look like a Skittles commercial.
They do it differently, and I like the way that they did it.
Oh, yeah. When I first saw the trailer for the movie, my thought was like, as a screenwriter, you know, learning about writing movies kind of ruins watching them for you because you can really tell where they're going. Thor is a really basic fall and rise story. Thor is the son of Odin. He gets tricked into causing this war with the Frost Giants, pisses off his dad. He gets thrown into another dimension, to Earth. Odin goes into his sleep. Loki starts wrecking shit and being an asshole. Thor has to stop being a dick and start being a hero. Of course, the love he has with Natalie Portman's character redeems him, and that's part of his transition from asshole to hero. And really, Iron Man had the exact same character arc, too. However, it works, okay? The reason they do it over and over again, because it works. Chris Hemsworth is so damn charming in this. I feel like this dude could charm a homeless man out of his last meal.
And he could sell a blind man a TV.
And the movie is funny, too. The scenes where he gets tranked in the hospital room, and they run him over with the car twice. And the scene where he goes drinking with Stalin Sargasses. He has made his ancestors proud tonight.
My favorite scene, actually, out of the whole movie is not an action scene. Mm-hmm. My favorite part is when they take him to the diner, and he's drinking that
more of this wonderful drink.
I need more!
And smashes the cup.
I was like, you know, that's something I could see Thor doing.
Well, and the character is big and boisterous.
And after seeing him in that part, I don't know that I could honestly pick anybody else.
And that was one of the problems with the movie. I couldn't think of an established actor that could have done it. Chris Hemsworth totally pulled it off. The rest of the cast is quite good, too. I like the guy that played Loki. You know, Loki is an interesting character. He's not just a cackling evil villain, though he sometimes is in the comics. As the story has evolved, he sort of comes kind of tragic. He has this whole daddy issue. As in Chronicle, the character that eventually becomes that villain starts out with good intentions, and Loki doesn't want to be evil. The fact that his daddy doesn't love him enough, that turns him into this villain.
One thing that I don't understand, and this is just a thing with Loki's character, not with the movie. If Loki is the son of a frost giant.
That's in the original Norse myths. I can't answer your question. Anthony Hopkins plays Odin, and originally Brian Blessed was cast as Odin, and can you fucking imagine how amazing that would have been?
I don't know who Brian Blessed.
The Hawkman and Flash Gordon. It would have been awesome. And I'm not a real big fan of Anthony Hopkins in this part, but it doesn't distract from the movie. And when we were seeing clips online of the film before it came out, I thought the costumes looked kind of weird. I wasn't really sold on the costumes, but it didn't bother me enough that it ruined the movie. I still am not super crazy about the costume, but whatever.
Oh, I don't know. I think the costumes
I don't really like
good.
the baggy pants. And at the end, when Thor is finally back in Asgard and has the hammer again and is flying, it looks a little silly, I feel. And I missed the helmet. There should have been more of the helmet. That was my one major nerdy...
Well, you gotta remember, though, most people nowadays are probably more familiar with the...
Well, Thor still has the crazy wing helmet in the comic.
They're more familiar with the Ultimate version.
Okay, maybe.
And the Ultimate version doesn't have a helmet, doesn't have a cape.
For me, the wing helmet is as iconic and associated with Thor as the Captain America shield is with Captain America. I guess they thought it looked a little too silly. Whatever.
I mean, it is a little hard to put that on camera.
Yeah, I guess. Overall, Thor was very successful. I liked it a lot. And it totally made Asgard work. It's a concept that should have been ridiculous, and somehow it all works. I don't know how they pulled it off. They understood the material. They got that it needed to have just a little bit of a twinkle in its eye. It needed to be a little silly. They got a great cast.
Yeah, like especially the people who played the Warriors 3.
Yeah.
Sif.
Yeah, she was good. And the Destroyer was cool. The special effects in all of these movies are fantastic. They make ridiculous, fantastic things seem very realistic and plausible. I liked Thor a lot, and I didn't realize you liked it so much.
Oh, I love Thor. That's my favorite one so far.
Well, for me, my favorite one is Captain America. Now, I'm a big fan of Captain America to begin with, and this movie got it all right. I've just never seen a better comic book adaptation. It nailed every single thing. Chris Evans was not my first pick for the role. I, didn't really like him in Fantastic Four. I didn't know if he could do it. But he's earnest and lovable. Everything Steve Rogers should be. Man, I just thought Captain America got it so right. It understood something essential about the character. If you had made Captain America a jingoistic, if you're not America, you need to die type character, which occasionally has been written at from time to time, unfortunately. The character needs to be somebody who wants to go and fight the Nazis because they're bullies, and he believes standing up for what's right. And there have been numerous times in the comics where Captain America has been ashamed of the fact that he's associated with the country, and the character isn't representative of the American government, he's representative of the ideals that built this country. One thing I'm worried about the Avengers is I'm not real crazy about the new Captain America costume, compared to the one they used in the first movie, which I didn't like at first, but it really works in the film. It's functional, but it still looks like the character.
I remember shoulder pads.
And yeah, you were bitching about the shoulder pads.
They looked stupid when he lifted his arms and stuff. They looked awful.
Whatever. Chris Evans, perfect as Captain America. They completely nailed the philosophy behind the character. The movie is so much fun. It rolls along at a great pace. There's a lot of action in this movie. If you look at it, like I said, there are really only 2 or 3 or 4 action scenes in the other films, but this movie has the entire second half is action, action, action. Even if it's in a montage, but it's cool. They even get the Hydra goons in the fucking Hydra suits. Hugo Weaving, really good at the Red Skull.
Yeah.
Hugo Weaving plays a lot of parts like this. Agent Smith, Elron, V, and Megatron, and now he's the Red Skull too, but whatever, he works. And I love the fact that he based his accent off of Klaus Kinski. Toby Jones is Armine Zola, fantastic. Tommy Lee Jones, hilarious. Dum Dum Dugan's in the movie. Dum Dum Dugan's in the movie, come on! Compare something to Raiders of the Lost Ark, might seem like a tall order, but I felt like it was at that level. Really that good. It was my favorite movie of last year. #1 film.
I still think Thor was better.
Well, that's your opinion. You're wrong.
Well, maybe you're wrong.
Of course, as exciting as all these films have been individually, since the very first Iron Man, they've all been building up towards the event of the year for me.
And for me.
And that is, of course, the Avengers. Now, I don't think I've been this excited for a movie since Freddy vs. Jason. That was the last time I was this excited for something. Because I'm a huge nerd.
Oh, man.
And I love crossovers. The Avengers, it's been building up for the last 5 years with these little references here and there. And what's so exciting about this is it's a superhero team-up movie. And we've never had anything like this before. Not really. And it's pre-established characters coming together for the first time. I mean, come on. This is nerd nirvana.
It's nerdvana.
Nerdvana. Now, don't get me wrong, I have some very minor issues with the film so far. First off, Joss Whedon directing. I am a recovering Joss Whedon fan. I loved Buffy when it was first on the air, and over the years, Joss Whedon has made me hate him with the things he's done. Primarily killing off characters we've grown to love, and making characters we've loved miserable. That worries me just a little bit. And the fact that we still don't know who the central threat of the movie is going to be. Obviously, Loki's the main bad guy, and he has some sort of alien force behind him, but is it Skrulls? Is it
Kree?
Kree? Is it Frost Giants? Is it a completely brand new alien created just for the movie? We still don't know. And honestly, I'm kind of impressed they've managed to keep that under wraps for so long. You think that shit would have leaked on the internet months ago?
Skrulls.
Probably. It's really hard to nitpick the movie before it comes out. My excitement level is so high I can't even really... Nah, I'm a giggling little 7-year-old boy at this point for this movie. I just... If it disappoints me, I might go on a killing spree.
There is no bite about it. He will go on a killing spree.
They managed to get really good actors. I mean, Robert Downey Jr., great as Iron Man. Chris Evans, perfect as Captain America. Chris Hemsworth, perfect as Thor. And they're going to be together, and they're going to be interacting, and they're going to be kicking ass together.
And then you throw in the Hulk.
Like I said, I like Edward Norton as Bruce Banner. I'm going to miss him, but as we pointed out, really how important is he when a CGI character is going to be the main star of that role? I like Mark Ruffalo too. We'll see how he does. Really, my only issue is why is Hawkeye in the movie? Because who gives a shit about Hawkeye?
And why doesn't he wear a mask?
Well, he's got sunglasses on.
They gave Thor his costume. Iron Man's got his costume.
I think the purple wing mask maybe would have been pushing it too far. They don't seem to like to put comic book characters in movies in purple unless they're the Joker.
Well, I would have been okay with a color change and maybe even taking off the wings, but to me,
he really needed a mask. My issue with Hawkeye is, okay, you've got Captain America, who is a super soldier. You've got Iron Man, who is a walking battleship. You've got the Hawk, who is a giant, indestructible, super strong, massive monster. You've got Thor, who is a god, and then you summon lightning bolts from the sky to fight his foes. And then you've got a guy who shoots arrows. Basically, to sum it up, I cannot be more excited for the Avengers. I am shivering with anticipation. Well, I think it should be apparent by now that the two of us are pretty big nerds.
I would say.
The wait between this episode and the next one will not be as long, I promise. More horror next time, maybe.
Well, we're doing Godzilla next time, aren't we?
Well, we seem to have come to that decision, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Or
at least I have.
Well, it's Godzilla horror?
He's a giant monster that destroys cities.
Okay. As always, I am Mr. Bangers, a.k.a. Zach, and this is
Mr. Mash, a.k.a. God.
As always, thank you for listening. See you around next time.
Adios, mi amigos. Avengers, assemble!